Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for attending today's student representative meeting. The main item on our agenda is the proposed digital wellness policy, a new guideline suggested by our campus administration. Under this proposal, students' access to social media platforms such as TikTok, Instagram, and X are being restricted during class hours and certain designated study periods on campus Wi-Fi. The intention, as stated by the administration, is to help students improve academic concentration and reduce digital distractions. Our task this afternoon is to evaluate this proposal critically. We aim to share diverse perspectives, examine the benefits and drawbacks, and, if possible, reach unified recommendation for submission to the Student Affairs Department. Joining me are two representatives who will offer contrasting viewpoints. On my right is Al, who supports the implementation of this policy, and on my left is Alia, who holds reservations about it. I'll now invite each of you to deliver your opening statements. Al, would you like to begin?
Thank you, Yaya. I appreciate the opportunity to share my view. Personally, I strongly support the proposed digital wellness policy. From my observation, and I'm sure many of us can relate, social media addiction has quietly become one of the leading distractions among students. During lectures, instead of taking notes, some students are scrolling endlessly through TikTok or replying to messages. This policy isn't about punishment, it's about discipline. It's about helping us to relearn on how to focus. When social media access is temporarily limited during learning hours, students can dedicate their full attention to lessons, discussions, and academic tasks. There are research from the University of Malaya 2023 found that students who consciously reduce phone usage during study sessions reported a 30% improvement in concentration and comprehension. That's not a small number. It demonstrates how digital distractions truly affect learning outcomes. Moreover, lecturers have expressed concern about students' divided attention. Implementing this policy could restore mutual respect in classrooms and between educators and learners. To me, this is not a matter of control, but cultivating self-discipline through structure. When the environment itself supports focus, it becomes easier for students to perform at their best.
Thank you, Yaya. Thank you, Al, for that thoughtful start. I completely understand your concern about distraction. However, I must respectfully disagree with the solution proposed. While I agree that social media can sometimes interfere with focus, restricting access entirely during class or study hours feels too extreme. Many students, myself included, use these platforms for academic purpose. For instance, group discussion often happen through WhatsApp, Telegram, or even Instagram group chats. We share Google Docs, links, and research updates through them. If these platforms are suddenly blocked, coordination within study groups will become harder. It could actually slow down productivity instead of improving it. Also, the policy assumes that all students lack self-control, which I find a bit unfair. We should be encouraging digital literacy and responsible use rather than imposing blanket restrictions. A one-size-fits-all rule rarely works in a diverse student population. Instead of restriction, the university could focus on awareness programs, helping students understand the consequences of distraction, teaching mindfulness techniques, and promoting time management skills. Those are sustainable habits that come from understanding, not enforcement. In short, we should trust students to self-regulate, not monitor them. Education should empower, not confine.
Thank you both for articulating your views so clearly. So far, we have two perspectives. Al supports the proposed restriction, emphasizing structure and focus. Meanwhile, Alia prefers self-regulation and digital balance through education. To move forward productively, we'll discuss three key areas, which is academic performance, mental health, and practical implementation. I encourage both of you to respond respectfully, use evidence where possible, and keep the focus on constructive debate. Okay? Let's begin with the impact on academic performance. Al, please start us off.
Thank you, Yaya. Honestly, I think the evidence clearly shows that unrestricted phone use in class reduces focus. This policy could significantly improve classroom engagement and note-taking.
I see your point, but a total restriction ignores students who actually use their devices productively, such as taking digital notes or researching during discussions.
Both perspectives are important. Let's unpack them in detail as we move to the next segment. Okay, let's examine the academic aspect in depth. Al, since you raised it earlier, please elaborate.
Certainly, based on a faculty survey we conducted last semester, around 60% of students admitted to using their phones for non-academic purposes during lectures. Some even said that they lose track of lessons after checking notifications. This highlights how habitual phone checking breaks concentration cycles. A structured policy will remind students that class time is sacred for learning. It's not to ban phones forever, just to create a clear boundary during learning hours. In fact, many international institutions already apply similar limits. For example, the National University of Singapore restricts non-educational Wi-Fi access in lecture halls, and results show improved participation.
I acknowledge that distraction is real, but restriction alone doesn't teach focus. Students might simply switch to mobile data to bypass the Wi-Fi block. So the real question is, will the policy change behavior or just push it elsewhere? Instead of control, why not education? We could introduce digital wellness modules that guide students to monitor their own screen time. When people understand why focus matters, they will naturally adjust.
So Alia believes internal motivation is stronger than external restriction. Al, how would you respond to that?
Honestly, that's a fair argument, but awareness alone isn't always enough. Many students already know scrolling TikTok during class hurts focus, yet they still do it. Sometimes structure supports discipline. Think of it like campus dress codes, not to control identity, but to maintain environment consistency.
Yes, but discipline grows from understanding, not rules.
Excellent. We have the crux of the debate, structure versus self-regulation. Okay, let's move to the second area, mental health. There's a popular view that social media can harm emotional stability, but also a counter view that it provides connection and comfort. Al, would you like to begin?
Of course. Studies from Taylor's University 2022 and Harvard's Digital Psychology Department both found that prolonged exposure to social media, especially during stressful academic periods, that increases anxiety and social comparison. If the policy helps students reduce constant online pressure, we might see better focus and improved mental clarity. Imagine having learning spaces where phones are constantly buzzing. It can reduce overstimulation and promote mindfulness. We can still allow social media during breaks. The goal is moderation, not total isolation.
I appreciate that you brought mental health into the discussion, Al. But I think it's more complex. For many students, social media is also a coping mechanism, a way to express emotions, connect with friends, or seek peer support. Removing the outlet during long study hours might create frustration or a sense of control. Some international universities, like Monash University Malaysia, have introduced digital detox corners. These are voluntary spaces where students choose to put phones aside and reconnect physically. That builds mindfulness without force.
Oh, that's an interesting alternative, voluntary rather than compulsory. Al, what are your thoughts?
Honestly, I actually like the concept, but voluntary measures often attract only the already disciplined students. The rest, the one who most need focus, might ignore it. So, a campus-wide framework ensures consistency.
True, but if the university enforces too much control, students may feel mistrusted. A sense of autonomy is crucial for motivation. The policy risks damaging that trust.
Okay, both views are valid. We'll note that R focuses on structure for stability, right? And Alia emphasizes choice for mental well-being. Okay, now about feasibility. Even if the policy is beneficial, is it realistic? Alia, please start.
Sure, implementation will be challenging. If the campus blocks social media via Wi-Fi, students can still switch to mobile data, meaning enforcement is incomplete. Also, who enforces it? Lecturers? IT officers? If staff have to monitor students, it could create tension and reduce trust in classroom. The learning environment should feel empowering, not policed.
Those are valid concerns. However, technology has evolved. Most campuses now have network management systems that automatically block non-academic sites only during specific hours. Let's say 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. This doesn't require personal monitoring. It's automated, unobtrusive, and can be customized for academic exceptions.
I see. Still, even automated restriction affect perception. Students may feel quietly controlled even if it's invisible. It's about the message the university sends, trust or authority. A more balanced approach would be digital moderation, not censorship. For example, apps that remind users to take breaks or track screen time.
That's an excellent point. Policy language matters. Whether students see it as guidance or restriction influences their response. Okay, let's close this section with one deeper question. Should universities have the moral right to control digital behavior on campus?
In my opinion, yes, within reasonable limits. The university's primary responsibility is to maintain a learning environment. Rules already exist: attendance, dress codes, academic honesty. Managing digital distraction is a natural extension of that duty.
But there's a difference between managing behavior and controlling autonomy. Dress code regulate appearance. Digital restriction regulate thought access. It's a slippery slope.
That's a fair philosophical concern. Still, every policy requires balance, freedom with responsibility.
Okay, thank you both. It's evident that your disagreement lies not in the importance of digital wellness, but in the method of achieving it. We'll take the next 15 minutes to see whether compromise is possible. Okay, before we proceed to the conclusion, let me recap our discussion. First, academic performance. I'll emphasize structure to protect focus, while Alia promoted education and self-discipline. Alright? Okay, next, mental health. I'll link restriction to reduced anxiety, while Alia highlighted emotional support through connection. And lastly, the third point is implementation. I suggested automated systems. Alia warned against mistrust and rigidity. Okay, both of you have presented strong evidence-based points, but as representatives, our role isn't only to debate. It's to collaborate and craft a balanced, workable solution. Okay, so let's see if we can bridge your ideas. Okay, what if the policy limited social media access only during scheduled lecture times, not the entire day? Access would remain open during breaks and after class. Would that meet your goal?
Honestly, yes, that would address the main issue, distraction during lectures. Outside those hours, students could still enjoy flexibility. It keeps structure but avoids over control.
Okay, now Alia, how do you feel about this limited hour approach?
That's more balanced. I would support it if paired with digital awareness campaigns. For example, workshops on focus techniques, mental health breaks, and responsible social media use. Education plus limited restriction could work better than either alone.
Okay, excellent. So, rather than a ban, we might propose a digital wellness framework that includes 3 points, which is limited access hours, educational workshops, and student feedback reviews, right?
Yeah, I like that terminology. Framework sounds positive. It shows trust instead of punishment.
Exactly. The language itself encourages cooperation.
Okay, then we're moving toward mutual ground. To ensure clarity, let's outline the proposed framework. First, access limitation. Social media access restricted only during official lecture hours and access restored during study breaks, evenings and weekends. Okay, other than that, education component, monthly digital wellness workshops focusing on time management, focus techniques and healthy online behavior. The third point is support resources, voluntary digital detox corners in libraries and student lounge. Lastly, the feedback channel. Online form for students to share their experiences and suggestions after one semester. Okay. Does this summary reflect both of your flaws fairly?
Yes, it keeps focus while respecting autonomy.
Agreed. With these conditions, I think most students would respond positively.
Okay, that's great. It's inspiring to see both sides adapt and collaborate, finally. Alright, before we close, I'd like to ask each of you to reflect briefly. What have you learned about communication and teamwork through this discussion?
I've learned that listening to opposing views doesn't weaken your argument. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you both for those insightful opening remarks. Now let's go a bit deeper into the main issue, whether our campus should implement a digital wellness policy that limits social media access during class hours and study periods. I can see both of you have very different perspectives. So let's unpack that carefully. Alia, perhaps you can start by expanding on why you disagree with this proposal.
Thank you, Yaya. I appreciate this opportunity to elaborate. I'm against the idea mainly because I believe this kind of restriction oversimplifies the problem. It assumes social media is purely a distraction, but that's not always true. For many students, myself included, platforms like Instagram, WhatsApp, or even TikTok can be sources of learning, creativity, and communication. For example, during my group assignments, we often use WhatsApp to share documents instantly or Instagram Reels to gather ideas for visual projects. Restricting itself would make collaboration slower, especially for subjects that rely on quick sharing of media. I also think it's unfair to assume all students misuse social media. What we need isn't restriction, but education. We should be taught how to use it wisely instead of being completely cut off during study periods.
I understand your point, Anya, but I think that's idealistic. Not everyone uses social media as responsibly as you do. The truth is, for most students, scrolling becomes a habit, something they do even during lectures or when they are supposed to revise. When I walk through the library, I often see students staring at their phones for long stretches, switching between apps instead of focusing. It's not just about collaboration anymore, it's about attention management. Okay, if we have a digital wellness policy, it doesn't mean complete restriction forever. It means there are structured limits, like blocking social apps during lecture hours only. That can help students focus better and prevent burnout caused by digital overload. Even mental health studies shows that reducing screen time improves concentration and lowers anxiety. So, I think a little discipline can go along the way.
I see your point, but discipline should come from within, not from forced rules. Once we depend on policies to control ourselves, we lose self-regulation. If the campus blocks social media, students might just find loopholes. using mobile data instead of Wi-Fi, for example. That would defeat the purpose and might even create frustration rather than focus. Instead, why not encourage digital mindfulness workshops? We could teach students how to manage their own screen time. That builds long-term responsibility rather than temporary control.
Those are both valid perspectives. Alia, you're emphasizing freedom and personal responsibility, while Al is focusing on structure and discipline.
Yeah.
Let's explore this more. Al, how would you respond to the concern that forced restrictions might cause resentment or lead to students bypassing the system entirely?
Honestly, that's a fair question, Yaya. Yes, some students might resist, but that doesn't mean the policy is bad. Every good rule faces resistance at first. The purpose is not to punish, it's to protect. If you think about it, even wearing seatbelts was once unpopular, but now we understand it's for safety. Similarly, social media limits are about academic safety, protecting our focus, our productivity, and our emotional well-being. Besides, the policy could be flexible. It could allow certain approved platforms like Google Classroom or WhatsApp for study-related discussions, while blocking purely in entertainment sites. It's not about total restrictions, it's actually about balance.
Balance, yes. But the issue is, who decides that balance? The campus administration, lecturers, or students themselves?
Student
If it's imposed from above without consulting students, it feels like control, not care. I know many of my friends rely on social media for small things, motivational videos, quick study hacks, or even emotional support communities. Cutting that off might unintentionally harm those who depend on it for encouragement. We have to think of the emotional dimension too, not just the academic side.
Okay, that's an important point, Alia. Digital wellness isn't only about reducing distractions, it's also about emotional connections and belonging, right? Okay, Al, do you think there's a way for this policy to respect both focus and emotional needs?
Yes, I think so. Maybe we could include flexibility in the policy, like digital breaks. Students could have short scheduled periods during study hours to check their messages or social media. I think that way they don't feel completely cut off. It's similar to how schools schedule recess, a mental reset. If implemented well, this policy can teach students that balance you mentioned earlier. Sometimes discipline has to be practiced through structure before it becomes natural.
I appreciate that compromise, Al. It's more reasonable than a total ban. Still, I would argue that instead of enforcing restriction, we could run campaigns or reward systems, like giving recognition to students who manage their screen time responsibly. That's more motivating than punishment. When people feel trusted, they tend to act more maturely. Policies that assume we will misuse freedom might backfire.
Okay, I can see you're both approaching this from a genuine concern for students' well-being, one from discipline, one from trust. Let's pause for a moment to reflect. Okay, so far we've established that digital wellness is necessary, but the method of implementation matters. The question now is, what kind of communication and teamwork could make such a policy fair to everyone? Okay, Alia, if the administration were to include students in planning this policy, would that change your stance?
Definitely. If students are involved through surveys, focus group, or digital committees, it would make the policy more acceptable. When people feel heard, they cooperate better. I would be more open to a system where students co-design the rules, like deciding which apps are considered productive or distracting. That way, we get your structure and my flexibility at the same time.
I think that's a good middle ground. I agree that involving students could help avoid resentment. Maybe the student council could lead a pilot program to test how the policy works before it's fully applied. If it works well, I think it could even become a model for other campuses to gain a balanced approach between discipline and freedom.
I love how both of you are slowly merging your ideas. That's what collaborative decision making is all about. Let's move into the next part where we'll discuss real consequences, both positive and negative, of having or not having this policy and how it affects teamwork, focus, and student life on campus. Take a minute to gather your thoughts and we'll continue. Okay. Alright, let's continue. We've heard both sides, restriction versus self-control, and I really appreciate how both of you are keeping the discussion respectful and reflective. Now, let's look at the potential consequences of implementing the digital wellness policy. What would actually happen if this policy became real on our campus? Al, since you support the policy, maybe you can start by describing the positive outcomes you expect to see if it's implemented effectively.
Thank you, Ilya. I think if this policy is implemented well, I think we would notice several positive changes quite quickly. First, academic performance could improve. Many students lose hours every week scrolling through social media. Imagine if even half of that time was spent revising notes, attending workshops, or reading articles. Their grades would go up and the students would feel less pressure at the end of the semester. Second, attention spans could improve. Right now, students multitask too much. They text while taking notes or check their notifications during lectures. When the brain switches between tasks so frequently, focus weakens. So, with the policy, students could train themselves to stay present, listen more attentively, and participate more actively in class discussions. And third, mental health could benefit. There is growing research linking heavy social media use with anxiety, low esteem, and poor sleep quality. A structured environment might help students rest their minds and rediscover offline hobbies. So, overall, I see the policy as a way to help students live more balanced life, not just academically, but emotionally too.
Those are valid points, Al, and I don't disagree entirely. But I think the picture isn't that simple. For every positive effect you mentioned, there might be unintended negative too. For example, if the policy blocks social media entirely during study hours, students who rely on online resources might struggle to adapt. A lot of learning content, especially for language and media courses, is shared through platforms like YouTube, Instagram, and even TikTok now. Restricting that would make learning less dynamic and creative. And from an emotional standpoint, if students suddenly can communicate freely online during stressful study periods, they might feel isolated. We shouldn't underestimate how much emotional support people get from quick chat with friends, especially during exam seasons. So while the policy might improve disciplines, it might also increase loneliness and frustrations. That's why I believe education about balance works better than enforcement.
That's a very important observation, Arya. So on one hand, we have the potential for improved focus and grades, but on the other, there's a risk of social disconnection. Okay, let's explore that tension. What happens if we don't have the policy at all? Could things get worse?
Honestly, yes. If we continue without boundaries, digital distractions might get worse over time. I have noticed that attention spans among students are already shrinking. These people struggle to read long articles or stay focused in lectures longer than 10 minutes. If this continues, it will affect the quality of graduates of our university produces. Employers often say new graduates lack focus and time management. So, if we don't do anything, we might end up normalizing distraction. That is dangerous in the long term.
I see what you mean, but I still think control isn't the best solution. If we always rely on restrictions, students won't learn real self-discipline. Once they graduate, there won't be any policies controlling their screen time, right?
Yes.
They will need to manage themselves. So, instead of depending on the university to impose limits, we should train students to be independent digital citizens. In fact, why not use social media itself to promote awareness? The campus could run creative campaigns like challenges like screen-free study hours or digital detox week. Those positive voluntary movements might reach more people than a forced rule.
Okay, that's actually a great idea, Alia. Okay, Al, what do you think of that kind of approach? Voluntary participation rather than mandatory restriction?
I think it could work if students actually participate it seriously. The problem is that without clear structure, many might ignore it. Voluntary programs often attract students who are already disciplined, but not the ones who struggle the most with distractions. So that's why I believe a hybrid model could be effective. The policy could include certain mandatory focus periods where social media access is restricted, but also encourage campaigns and workshops to educate students. That way, discipline and awareness could develop together.
That's actually a reasonable middle ground, I admit.
Yeah.
I can see the benefit of short-term restriction if they come with the education and emotional support. For example, if during midterms the campus activates focus mode Wi-Fi but provides digital wellness counseling for stressed students, that would feel more supportive than controlling. So maybe the problem isn't the policy itself, it's how it's presented and implemented.
Exactly. I think that's the key insight we're researching here. The way a policy is communicated often determines whether people see it as caring or controlling. Okay, in communication theory, we call this framing. If the digital wellness policy is framed as helping students focus and care for their mental health, people will respond positively. But if it's framed as restricting social media use, it will sound authoritarian. So, as future educators and communicators, this is where our leadership skills matters in how we convey rules with empathy.
That's true, Yaya. I like that. Framing with empathy. If leaders explain policies with compassion, even strict rules can feel fair. Maybe that's what's missing in most school regulations, the why behind the rule. I think if students understand that the digital wellness policy is meant to protect mental health and promote productivity, not control freedom, they will accept it more openly.
Yeah, I completely agree with Alia. In fact, we could even rebrand it. Instead of calling it a restriction policy, maybe we could call it a digital balance framework. It sounds more positive and collaborative, right? That's the kind of communication approach that encourages cooperation instead of conflict.
I love that. The digital balance framework. Okay, it captures exactly what we've been discussing: balance, structure, and well-being. Alright, before we wrap up, I'd like both of you to reflect briefly on how this debate has changed your personal views, not just about the policy, but about teamwork and communication itself. Okay, take a moment to think, and then we'll move into our final agreement and closing reflections.
Wait ah.
Okay, both of you are ready?
Yes.
Alright, I think we've reached a meaningful, a meaningful point of understanding. Both of you have acknowledged the strengths and weaknesses of the digital wellness policy. And what's impressive is how the discussion evolved from disagreement to collaboration. Okay, let's take this moment to outline what a balanced version of the policy could actually look like. Al, could you start by summarizing what you'd like to see in the final framework?
Sure, yeah. Honestly, based on everything that we have discussed, I think the final proposal should combine discipline with flexibility. First, the digital balance framework should restrict social media access only during official lectures hours, not the whole day. That keeps the focus on class time while still allowing freedom during breaks and evenings. Second, there should be a digital wellness workshops or any campaigns so students could understand why focus matters, not just what they are being told to do. And finally, the university should collect feedback after a semester to adjust the policy based on student experience. Mm, that would make it fair, practical, and supportive rather than restrictive.
Okay, that's a clear and well-structured outline, Al. Thank you. Alia, what about your side? What elements would make you feel confident supporting this new framework?
Honestly, I think what Al just said sounds balanced. I will only add two things. First, the university should focus on transparency and empathy when communicating the policy, like explaining its goals clearly and ensuring students feel included in the process. Second, there should be voluntary participation elements, like digital detox challenges, focus spaces, or peer-led awareness projects. This gives students ownership of their own digital habits instead of feeling controlled. If both structure and self-regulation exist together, I think it would truly represent what digital wellness means.
Beautiful. Both of you have contributed valuable ideas that complement each other. So, let me summarize our agreed framework for the record. Okay, so we have 5 digital balance framework that we have discussed. First, focus periods. Social media access restricted during lecture hours only. Freedom periods, full access during study breaks, evenings and weekends. And then the third, wellness education, regular workshops, awareness campaigns, and peer activities to promote responsible digital habits. Okay. And then the fourth is emphatic communication, clear, student-friendly message explaining the purpose of the framework. And lastly, the review mechanism, semester end feedback session to evaluate and improve the policy. Okay, are both of you in agreement for this summary?
Yes, completely. I think it keeps students focused while respecting their freedom.
Yes, I agree too. It feels balanced, human, and realistic.
Okay, wonderful. Now, before we conclude, I'd like to invite each of you to reflect personally. What have you learned through this discussion, both about the issue and about teamwork itself? Okay, you can go ahead first.
Okay, thank you, Yaya. What I have learned is that having strong opinions doesn't mean refusing to listen. At first, I believed that policy should be strict, no exceptions. But after hearing Alia's perspective, I realized that compassion and communication are just important as structure. Teamwork isn't about convincing others actually, it's about combining ideas to find something better than what any one of us started with. And that's exactly what we did today.
Okay, that's beautifully said. Thank you. Okay, Alia, what about you?
For me, I have learned that structure and freedom don't have to conflict. I started this discussion thinking that any restriction would automatically be negative. But after hearing Al's evidence and Yaya's guidance, I realized that sometimes structure actually help create balance, as long as it's done with empathy. I also learned how effective respectful communication can be. Even though we disagreed, we never lost professionalism or respect. That's the kind of environment that encourages real understanding. So yes, I would say this discussion taught me more than just policy. It taught me teamwork.
Okay, that's wonderful, Alia. Both of you demonstrated maturity and insight throughout. Okay, for me as the facilitator, this discussion reminded me that leadership isn't about controlling conversation. It's about creating space for it. My goal wasn't to decide who was right, but to make sure every voice was heard and every idea respected. And I'm proud to say that both of you made this discussion meaningful and deeply thoughtful. So, before we end, let's take one final minute each to summarize your stance. Now that you've heard both sides and reached a compromise, please go ahead.
Okay, so after our discussion, I still support the digital wellness policy, but with a new perspective. It should not be about the restriction alone, but about creating a healthy, focused and supportive learning environment. When policies are built with empathy and flexibility, they actually help students grow and not to feel too trapped. I think that's the version that I stand for now.
Okay, thank you. Alia, your turn.
I have always valued freedom and trust, but now I realize that discipline has its place too. So while I was initially against the policy, I now support a balanced approach where structure exists but with space for individuality and understanding. In short, I have learned that digital wellness isn't about cutting off, it's about connecting better.
Beautifully put, both of you. Okay, so in conclusion, this student representative meeting officially recommends the Digital Balance Framework to the Student Affairs Department, a policy that promotes focus, balance and empathy within our digital learning environment. Thank you Al and Alia for your professionalism, insight and teamwork. Okay, on behalf of the Student Representative Council, I hereby conclude today's meeting on the proposed digital wellness policy. Let's remember that technology is not our enemy. Distraction is. Balance is the key. When students, educators and institutions work together, digital wellness becomes a shared responsibility, not an imposed rule. Okay, so thank you once again for your thoughtful participation.
Thank you, Yaya.
Thank you, Yaya.
Okay, this meeting is adjourned. Let's continue leading with understanding both online and offline. Thank you everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.